alive. It's alive. It's alive. It's alive.
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is another author, a literary advocate, Natasha Deen. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, it's great to have you on the show. So, could you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and the sort of stuff you write, the books you've produced?
A little bit about myself. So let me think here. I will follow people home for cupcakes, and I will cross the street to pet a dog or a cat.
So I see why we're getting along so well then. Okay.
Yeah. And I write for kids, and I write for kids of all ages. So ages 5, 6, all the way up to high school, sort of like new adult, kind of blurs the line. And also writing for different age groups, as well as different reading abilities within those age groups.
Okay. Well, yeah. Cool. I mean, that's one thing I always find challenging is the different is writing, because I have written one young adult book. I don't really think it was a particularly good young adult. Actually, I've written more than one. I've published one.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was particularly good at being young adult, because even though I wrote it when I was, I think, 20.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't it was just or maybe 25. Time blurs. It was just one of those things that it was somewhere in that range. And in that particular case, it was a book that was just like, it was okay. It was very action heavy, and there was a lot of stuff happening, but it didn't really give the idea, the feel of, okay, this is a high school, or this is about growing up to the same degree as perhaps is necessary.
Well, it's interesting because some books can cross genre and cross age groups, right? Mm-hmm. So you can have a book that you write for a young adult, but it appeals as well to kids in middle grade, or it also appeals to adults at the same time. So, I don't know. I don't. If I were you, I wouldn't fret it that it wasn't like on the nose YA. I'm sure it was lovely.
It was a pretty good book. I enjoyed it. For at the time, I think I was not writing my best work, but it's true. I think it was a pretty decent book. And before that, when I wrote a young adult book, and I'm just going to go off of my other young adult book for a second here, that this one isn't published because it turned out that it was a mess. It was my second novel ever, I think, second or third. And I wrote that one when I was actually a teenager.
Yeah.
And it had so many points of view that it was just unmanageable. That's the main problem with it. I really liked the story, but there was like, well, why is it all broken up in all these different viewpoints? It doesn't really work. Anyway, so what's the title of one of your books that's young adult or just for kids in general?
Oh, well, my latest YA is called In the Key of Niragani, and it is all about Niragani. Haha, bet you couldn't see that one coming. And she is Guyanese, like me, and she comes from an immigrant family, like me. And she really desperately wants to be a professional trumpet player. But like many immigrant kids, the idea is, your parents bring you to North America to be a professional. So you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be a doctor. You're going to be something that they know for sure will take care of you long term. Mm-hmm. And the artistic industry, not so much. And so the story is just sort of about Nira grappling with her parents to convince them that this is a thing that she wants to do, but also, kind of trying to figure out who she is in the world. And as much as she wants other people to listen to her voice, she also needs to quiet herself to hear the other voices in her life. And I'm really excited about it. It comes out on April 9th, and it's Barnes & Noble. I think it made their top 25 most anticipated own voice novels. Chapters Indigo Teen listed it as the most anticipated novel, and something else. I think it was selected as and it was selected as the Junior Library Guild selection.
Nice.
So
it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's really connecting with people, and that just makes me so happy because even though she's an immigrant kid trying to find her way in the world, I mean, really, the story is about kind of all of us
Hmm.
trying to find our way in the world, and all of us who at some point in time have felt different for whatever reason it is that makes us feel like maybe we don't quite fit this world. And then just learning that, you know what, it's okay. It just like the garden can't be all roses or tulips. There has to be different flowers. There's got to be trees and shrubs and bushes, or else it's just not as pretty a garden, right?
Yeah, is the one song from that I remember from my childhood? There was a Harry Chapin song that went into where it was about a school, but it was it's like let's use all the colors, right? I mean, that's kind of the gist of the song.
Yeah.
The color of
Yeah.
painting flowers or whatever. So that's what came to mind.
Oh,
But
interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna
yeah,
say the only painting flower song I know, um oh heck, it was from like the 60s or the 70s. It was Red Flowers Are Red.
that's the one.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, because the
Oh,
teachers
yeah.
try to get the kid to paint flowers all red,
Oh,
and he
we
wants to
are
use all the
okay, good.
colors.
We are talking about the same one.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's that. I was like, that's the right era for sure, too. Yeah.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
yeah,
Yeah, the poor kid. Oh my gosh. That era was prime for ripping your heart out, right? Because they had the Red Flowers Are Red, and then they had Cats in the Cradle.
the both by Harry Chapin. Yeah, the
Yeah,
very
right.
very sad songs indeed. That
That
guy,
dude needed a
great performer
hug.
though.
Give
Great.
that man a cupcake stat.
Oh yeah, poor guy. Isn't that anyway? That when this show is not about music, despite I mean I am a huge Harry Chapin fan, but the show is not about music. Um, it, the basic idea though of a book is actually not that different, and I feel like so maybe this is going to throw a curveball, but do you find that punishing your reader, making them uncomfortable in some way, not punishing them, but making them uncomfortable is a part of writing a story for you, or are you more? Because I know there's writers that kind of take this from both directions. So let me try to explain that for a second, because like I know writers like Michael Anderle, who's been on the show recently. He is very much a comfort food kind of writer. That's the sort of stuff he likes to read. That's the sort of stuff he likes to write. And there's nothing wrong
Oh
with that
yeah.
either. So do you have a preference in that regard?
You know what? I don't have a preference. I don't even have a viewpoint on it because I guess my viewpoint on it is that even when we're all reading the same book,
Mm,
none of us are reading the same story,
okay.
right? Because
Yeah.
all of us are bringing our own filters, our own personal background, our fears, our hopes, our dreams, all of it. So we never read the same story, And I know, like, my mom, her favorite book is To Kill a Mockingbird, which no for me.
Yeah, not
And
for me either.
my little brother loves, I think it was Robinson Crusoe, or
Mm.
which is the one with the Lilliputians
Oh, that's actually
and
geez.
Gulliver's
No,
Travels. It was
Gulliver's
like,
Travels, yeah. Robinson
yeah.
Crusoe doesn't have any weirdness in it really. It's just about a guy on an island.
Well, actually, and it's funny that you say that because I remember a teacher raving about this book, and was so excited to read it. And there he is, stranded on this island, and this random person of color comes up to him, and the line was something about, I bid him to know that his name was Friday because I found him on a Friday,
All right.
and I taught him that my name was Master. And I was like, I'm gonna nope on out of here.
Oh, that was a
I'm
creepy
done.
book. Yeah, I
Right?
forgot. Yeah, now that you mention it,
Yeah.
I was also really annoyed with that book because like I thought this guy was about a guy surviving on his own, and yet there's other people there.
Well, you're like,
So for me, it
on,
kind of
dude.
defied its own premise, but also there's the creepy slavery part of it.
But yeah, but that's, you know what I mean? Like, that's where I think sometimes that's where writing can be such a difficult thing to do, because you're writing with the intention of making people feel comfortable or making people feel uncomfortable, or
Mm.
you're writing with some kind of viewpoint or horizon in mind, and then someone else can come along and read your story, and that is not what they come back with at all.
Mm.
And I mean, I've certainly had reader feedback where um, they love the story and they're talking about the things that they really liked, or the things that they felt were what's the word I'm looking for? Not important, but like I guess the things that connected with them. And then when I listen to them retell the story, there's all sometimes there's a part of me that goes, "What story are they talking? Like that's not the
Oh,
I
because they
don't
put the
remember that
emphasis
story."
somewhere else, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, so yeah, I don't have a particular I feel for myself, I just want to create a space that you will take whatever it is you want to take out of it. And whatever you want to take out of it, I am cool with because I don't have an expectation or a desired outcome in what I'm doing. I'm just really happy you sat down and decided to share whatever time you have with my work.
Okay, no, that's a really reasonable way to see it. I think, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I guess I was just curious from the craft perspective, if I mean, or from the reader perspective, even if you prefer a book. I mean, I kind of get, I can kind of guess your answer, but I want to know I want to know if I'm right or not, because I'm not gonna say it. But do you prefer a book that makes you think? Basically, I think most people would say they do, but not everyone does actually. That's the weird part,
No,
versus a book that makes you feel safe or comfortable or is familiar.
yeah, I like books that make me feel. I don't really care for books that make me think
Oh, really?
because
Okay,
I feel
that's a
like
good answer.
I think a lot, right? I think most of us are
Mhm.
like that. I'm definitely in the group that overthinks everything, like everything, and I'm the person
Yeah.
who is, it's midnight and I'm remembering that super awkward moment from 5 years ago that nobody else remembers but me, you know? I'm
Oh,
like, "Oh
wow,
god,
that's
I
the
hope
story of
they
my
feel okay
life.
about it." The person doesn't even remember, right? Like, that's just me overthinking every single breath I take. So yeah, so I really appreciate stories that just make me feel something, whether it's happy or comfortable. And I do, you're right, I do kind of err on the side of positive because for me, reading is what I do to escape, and reading is what I do to make myself happy. And as a person of color, as a mixed race kid, as a woman, um, I feel like I don't need you to teach me about that, or I don't necessarily need you. I don't necessarily want to read a story about someone who's going to struggle and try and struggle and try and get nowhere. Um, I'd rather the person get a happy ending because, quite frankly, that's what I'm rooting for myself, and that's what I'm rooting for other people. So those are the characters I want to kind of spend time with. And I remember, when I was a kid. Do you remember? Shoot, what's an Bridge to Terabithia,
Oh boy. Oh
right?
man.
And I remember reading that book and loving it right till the end and was just devastated. And I
Yeah.
remember going back to the librarian and being like, "Why? Why did you like recommend this book to me? And do you not realize that this terrible thing happens?" And she said, "Oh, well, the book is there to teach kids about death." And I
Mm,
thought, well, your assumption is that every kid needs to be taught about death, that there are kids who don't already know about this, one. And second, that's not what I took from it. What I took from it is if you ever leave your friends alone, terrible things are going to happen with them. So you always need to be around them, which is a terrible thing for like an 8 or a 9 year old to take away. Right. But there were so
yeah.
many books as a kid where I think they were trying to, from an adult perspective, I feel like they were trying to learn you something, um, and I didn't want to learn any of it, like
Yeah.
Where the Red Fern Grows is another one, right? It's
Oh,
supposed to be about love and loyalty. And I just was so angry that they killed the dogs, and
yeah.
right up until that point, I loved that kid. And at the point in time he let the dogs go in on his behalf, I was done with him because I have my creatures, and I'm telling you, they're I will go in between them. There's just not I well, I mean, that. I just said I'm gonna cross the street to pet a
No,
dog. So
absolutely. I mean,
obviously.
I think it's funny how, I mean, I think a lot of those stories have older, like there's an inherently harsher kind of, I guess, mythology that they're trying to create in a lot of those books. I mean, like that probably, I wonder if it comes from an earlier time or if it's just a matter of people who have a darker view of the world in some sense, of
That, or I
what
mean,
the
I
world
think it's
is.
maybe sometimes too that they're thinking they're creating a safe space for
Mm,
kids to learn different things. But again, you know, kids are not all the same, and our lives are not all the same, and our experiences are not all the same. And one of the things that always kind of strikes me as kind of an interesting thing is the discussion over vocabulary or what kinds of words you're allowed to use in books. And I always find it very, very interesting because I totally understand from a writing perspective and from a reader perspective that there are certain things you just don't want to step into because
Mm-hmm.
that is not going to be appropriate for that child. But I also remember, I think I was about 6 or 7, and I'd had a really horrible experience when I was 5 where a bunch of grade 9 kids had followed my sister and I home for weeks, throwing snowballs at us and yelling racial slurs and telling us to go home, which is as racial, as things to yell at a 5-year-old, go home is
Oh
probably
man.
not it, because as a 5-year-old,
And
I
you're like,
thought
I'm
he
on my
literally
way.
meant go
Yeah.
home. So I'm just like, man, if we go home, mom's gonna be so mad. And my sister's like, you're an idiot, just keep walking. And then just kind of go horror when I realized what exactly was happening in my life
Mm.
and what it meant for me as a person of color living in this world. And when I was 7, um, my uncle came and he picked me up. We were living in Calgary at the time, and there's this beautiful park, Glenmore Park, and he took me to the park, and we were like kind of on this hill. And Tim, I'm telling you, this just sticks in my head constantly. We're on this hill. There's this giant tree that we're standing under. The river is running past. And my uncle says, I heard about that thing that happened to you a couple years ago. And I'm like, yeah, let's not talk about this. But he was like, no, we have to talk about this because, like I said, my family is very, like, we are all different kinds of races and colors. So, my uncle is part black. So
Mm.
so we were sitting there and he's like, okay, Natasha, here's what you need to know. And here's all the words that people are going to call you as you move out. And I'm 7 years old, and my uncle is basically teaching me every single racial slur
Oh,
that I need to know. And,
wow.
and talking to me about just because the person's in a police officer's uniform doesn't mean that they're safe. You have to be smarter than everybody else, and you've got to be aware of who's around you. You got to be aware. And I'm 7, and he's like, going on and on. And then it was interesting too, because he finishes this whole thing, and then he kind of goes back to something that I love about my family, which is kind of the family mantra, which is, listen, and by the way, don't let it get to you, because whatever it is you want to do, you can do. Just ignore these. Like, these people exist. You're gonna have to deal with them, but don't pay them any mind. Just go and do what you need to do, and let the world take care of itself. But I was 7,
Yeah.
and I wonder about that. I wonder about um, how other kids grow, and I feel like it's so important for us to have different kinds of stories for different kinds of kids, because not every kid is growing up in safety. Not every kid, but then again, not every kid is growing up being unsafe, right? Like, not
Yeah.
every
No,
kid is,
absolutely.
right? So for all these different kids, there needs to be a story that connects with them. Um, and I love that. I love that there's just not one kind of story. And I also love that within the kid lit, and I don't really find it so much with adult literature, but within the kid lit community, there is an acceptance and embracing that not every kid, even within the same age group, is going to read at the same level. So,
Hmm.
you might have a 9-year-old that reads like a 9-year-old, and you'll have a 9-year-old that reads like a 12-year-old, and you have a 9-year-old that reads like a 6-year-old, and that's okay. We have a story for you. We have a book, right? And I love that. I just love it.
No, that's a very beautiful story. I mean, with your uncle, and also, I mean, because that's such an amazing moment, and the way you described it, honestly, maybe makes me. I mean, it reminds me of some of the. I mean, I'm not a a mixed race person. I'm not. I mean, I'm a ridiculously white person, and it is just, as well as, of course, being a man, and it is just a different. I mean, it's not, but there's parts of that story that ring so true to me,
Yeah.
even though, and not just because I know know some of the things that go on in the world, but because, I mean, I wasn't. I mean, I might be physically a normal person in some sense, or not normal, physically a member of this kind of dominant caste. We don't need to go into that too much. I shouldn't have said normal. That was awful. But anyway,
I know what you mean, though. I understand.
I see a lot of people who look like me where I live, right?
Yeah.
That's the gist of it.
Yeah.
But I'm not. I mean, I'm autistic. I was diagnosed when I was quite young. I was a preteen, and I have lots of weirdness about me. And it was one of those things. I mean, and mostly in the brain, and it was kind of this like. Yeah, and I went through some things because of that when I was younger. So it's one of those stories that's like, well, that's just there's a version of that for everybody, I guess, and that's so. I think that's very true, and I think that really that really resonates with me. What you just said there.
But you're right, because I mean, I would be, growing up, you think that, to use the word you were using, you think that there's some kind of definition of normal or average or acceptable, right? And you grow up and you're always wondering, why is it that you cannot fit into this little group, right? Like, why can't you be like everyone else? And then you get into adulthood and you realize none of us ever felt like we fit in. And all of us felt weird and different and awkward. And it's kind of too bad that we didn't all realize that when we were at that age, because I think it would have made for a much kinder way to grow up. And I wonder sometimes with bullying that if that's where it's coming from, is like someone who is just so afraid of being different. Like everyone has to fall into this little tiny category, or else, the whole schmozzle falls apart. That whole like rise and fall as a group. I can't remember. It's when they talk about communities and keeping everybody in line. It's out of my brain, but hopefully you know what I'm.
Yeah, no, I think I know what you mean. I mean, there's I've heard of this saying that they would have in I think it was from Japan, from modern Japanese culture or something, about the nails that you hammer everyone down so they fit.
Oh yeah.
And that's kind of that that's I mean, that's obviously it's a brutal expression. It's a brutal action that they're describing. Yeah. And that's because that's how a lot of these people feel about it. Presumably, a lot of the people there, like, and I believe it actually has something to do with because the gist of it then is actually taken up by organized crime. Is that they're the people who will not be hammered down, the Yakuza. I think that's their motto.
Oh wow!
So it's a weird they're and any organized crime, you're going to find them being quite out there as far as how intense they can be, for sure.
I've certainly heard that. Yeah. It's interesting because you wonder about those kids who were the hammers growing up, and how do they now move in the world? And I had a friend who was really bullied in high school, and the interesting thing was that I think it was like the first year of university, he happened into, I think he was at the mall or he was somewhere and ran into the kid who had bullied him, and just sort of had this moment where he was like, I'm not in high school. I don't need to be afraid. But, he's like, I'm afraid. This person's coming at me. But the interesting thing is when they actually like encountered each other, his bully said to him, like his bully actually came up to him to apologize and to explicitly say all the ways he had gone wrong with my friend and how much regret he had over that, and how much it bothered him, and I've had conversations with some of my bullies as well, and it's the same thing. Like there's so much regret and shame for those people when they realize what they've done, and
No, but that's really beautiful, especially when you take into account, I forget which philosopher said, I think it was some Greek philosopher, maybe I'm mistaken, but I think it was someone more modern perhaps, but there's this great quote, and I wish I could attribute it properly, but it's there's no one we hate more than the people we've wronged.
Whoa.
And
right?
It's just it's so true, because it's how do you, when you realize you were the one who did something wrong, in this case, these bullies, well, how do you forgive yourself and ask for forgiveness from someone else? You know, that's a difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
And
No,
so
it's true.
so it's really beautiful to hear people do that. I mean, and I know, I mean, I've done that from time to time, but uh, I've been that person sometimes. And I wasn't a big
Yeah.
bully, but I was a bit of a bully occasionally. I think all of us bully somebody at some point
Yeah.
if we don't know what we're up to, you know, when we're kids and all.
Yeah.
Oh man, well, this is. I mean, I almost hate to say it, but we're running a little low on time, so I would like to switch gears and
Oh yeah, sure. Sorry.
suggest briefly because this has been really fascinating and
No, I've really enjoyed
enlightening.
it. Yeah, you're fascinating to talk to. Yeah, this has been a good conversation. I've enjoyed it immensely.
Yeah, yeah, but I did want to ask you. I mean, because this is kind of just the usual thing I ask about on this show, but and it feels a little trite almost. But what have you been reading lately? Because
Oh
I have a feeling you've been. I have a feeling you might have a good recommendation for the listeners.
I do actually. I have three because I'm an overachiever. Uh, so for readers who really like fantasy and sort of myth built stories,
Mm.
Catherine, and I'm gonna have to say her name slow because I mix up letters. So it's Catherine Magyardi, and
Mm.
she's written a book called The Changeling of Fenland Forest. So you've got like a cursed forest, a cursed kid, maybe this like shrouded mystery, and unicorns. So I was behind that for sure.
Can't go wrong with the unicorn.
Right. And then for people who sort of like their stories a little bit more urban and based in reality, then Lisa J. Lawrence has a book out called Trail of Crumbs.
Mm.
And that one is a that's an intense read, but it's very good. It's very good. And then the last one is kind of a mix of both. So it's Kate Borman's What We Buried. And that one is for those people who like Twilight Zone kind of spooky. I'm not sure where this ground is shifting on me. That's a great read.
Nice. You know, those all sound amazing. And
Yeah.
as far as the book, I'm still digging my way through The Warded Man by Peter V. Brett. It's a huge book, and
Ooh.
and it's fantasy. It's epic fantasy. It's probably not as huge as some of these books. It's not a Brandon Sanderson tome. It's not like that. But it's a really solid book, and actually does involve a lot of younger characters, so it does kind of fit with what we're talking about today.
Nice.
Because even though it's a 5-book series, I think it's called The Demon Cycle, and this is the first one, and
Ooh.
I think it's also a complete series, which is a really good place for me to start because I've had the book for years, and I'm like, oh wait, now the whole series is done. I should finish this. I should actually pick this up and read it.
There's a reason I read slow.
Absolutely. And I'm really enjoying it. And there's a lot of this really down to earth stuff, even though it's a fantasy world with a lot of magic and monsters and stuff. It's really, I mean, I keep saying really, but it's very impactful. I've got to say, even though I'm only about a third of the way into it. So.
No, that's good. So how many points of view is it?
Oh, many. There are many.
Okay.
It switches between different kids in different places. So far, they've all been basically children who are the point of view characters. But I think they're all going to grow up over the course of the series. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be kind of Game of Thrones.
I'm so impressed with writers who can do that. That's incredible. That's talent. Yeah.
I'm trying to do that now, and it's not easy. I'm so bad at multiple points of view. We really have a lot to learn there.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
Yeah.
I know. Well, Nira is one point of view, just her point of view. Although her grandma weighs in quite often, and her grandma's sassy, so I love elder child relationships. So grandma keeps her in line.
Oh yeah. Yeah, actually, the series I've released most recently, the Pillar Universe series, which is science fiction, is all one point of view, and it originally was all one book too. So it was kind of this. It was one big fat 180,000 word book or something when I wrote it originally, and now it's 3 books because that's the more productive way to sell it. But also all one point of view except that there are flashbacks to the main character's past. So it's almost like a different point of view because there's somewhere she's a teenager and then most of the book she's an adult. So.
Oh, interesting. Nice.
And so I mean, and also the first book of that series is free right now. So we're going to move into plugs.
Ooh, okay.
So, because that's the way we go out of this show. So you can find that book because I am terrible at recording ads for this show. You can find Stormfleet at Amazon.com or wherever fine ebooks are sold. I mean, now it's wide. You can find it at Barnes and Noble. You can find it all over the place, and it's free. So give it a read. I think you'll enjoy it.
Nice.
Natasha, what have you been? What do you have out there? And where can people find your stuff?
So In the Key of Niragani releases on April 9th. And you can find it at bookstores. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it online. Wherever you want to find it, I bet you can find it. And yeah, it's funny. There's a lot of funny in the book because you're right. I think laughter is important. So if you like funny reads and heartfelt kinds of stories, and how did you say it? Comfort food? If you like comfort food stories, I think you'll enjoy Nira. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being in on the show, Natasha.
Well, thank you for having me, sir. That was a blast. The time flew.
Well, it's been awesome. And as for this podcast, you can find it more at mentalcellarpublications.com. You can email me at tim@timniederreiter.com. And thank you for listening, everybody. Take it easy.
That tears it.